Hey, I am here today with Nic Patterson. Hi, Nic.
Hi there.
I met Nic because both he and I are speaking at the TEDx Eustis, Florida event, January 28th. And when you hear his story, you'll know why he's here with us. I talked about you this morning on my Instagram reel, Nic.
Really?
Yeah. And I said, the best thing moms can do is find a hope hero. And you are a hope hero to me. And I know you will
Oh,
be to so many others. So is it okay if I share some of your story? Um, Even though it might be part of your TEDx? I think it's okay, isn't it?
it is okay because you're not giving the talk in its entirety. It's fine. Feel free to
Okay.
share whatever you think's relevant to your audience.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so and I'm gonna I love stories because I'm a novelist too on the side, and I love the hero's journey. And when I heard Nic's story, um, it was like, the whole arc to this story. I mean, it's just like, are you serious? This really happened? So, Nic, when he was 9, you lost, or when you were 9 already, you had suffered some severe trauma in your life because your mother had a substance use disorder. Am I right?
That's right.
And then when she was 9, she passed away.
Yeah, when I was 9, she passed
I
away.
mean, yeah, I said that wrong. When you were 9, yeah. Um, and unfortunately, so much of your life by the time you're 9. I parented my grandkids for years because their parents had a substance use disorder. So I know some of the trauma that they went through. And I know it wasn't as horrific as what you went through, but nonetheless, it's just really tough to start out like that. So then when she died and you were 9, did you go live with your grandmother right after that?
My life had already been chaotic prior to then, and I would be with my grandparents half the time and with my mom half the time.
Okay, probably like my girls, yeah. And then what was your grandma's name?
Joyce.
Joyce. Okay. So and then when you were living with Joyce, was it and your grandpa, what were they the ones that bought you a piano?
No, it was my mama who was Joyce. It was her mother, Mama Cat, her or Catherine, and it was my great grandmother that actually gifted me with the piano.
Oh my goodness. So did she see some ability in you at that point, or was it just like something she wanted to do?
They all saw the fascination I had at church. I would go and stand next to the pianist and the organist at a small country, rural Alabama church, and just I was mesmerized with watching the piano and hearing the melodies. And all the other kids at the church played the piano. I was the only one that didn't. It was a very musical church, and that was just something that when you have a small church and about 7 kids, it's not like there are a lot of kids there, but all of the others did play the piano.
Oh my goodness. And you had like, FOMO, fear of missing out. So you're like,
There
wait,
you
I want
go.
to play too. And
Yes.
great grandma, mama, she heard that. And so was it any type of piano or was it just a hand-me-down?
Oh,
What?
it's a great story. They used to advertise in the classifieds about pianos. And a truck pulled up to my driveway one day. There are no piano showcase rooms or anything like that in my area. And so this moving truck backed down into our driveway one day, and under the covers were new pianos. And they were asking which one I liked. And they didn't even go with which one I liked. They went with the one that matched the furniture. But it's just one of those things where I liked the shiny Blackwood, but we went with a very nice I believe it was an oak, and it was appropriate for our home. And it was a brand, and this is funny because I've been in the piano industry. I've never seen another piano with the brand name. It was just a cheap Asian made piano, a factory made piano, and very plastic in parts and that sort of
Oh,
thing. But it was my piano and I absolutely loved it. I didn't know
it didn't
anything.
matter. No, you didn't
And
know
I
any for
loved
sure.
it. I loved it. So,
Yeah.
but it was the brand name of Con, which is like the trumpet, but they are different companies. I researched. So
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because I'm like, wait, I've heard con because my husband used to play the trumpet or something. So yeah, I'll be darned. Okay. So how old then were you when you started playing?
I was 10 when I started playing.
Okay. And so did it bring you a lot of comfort or how long did you play? What motivated you?
Okay. I From my first lesson, which I've got to briefly tell you why music education is so important to me. My very first year, the local piano teacher was full. So she had her younger students teaching. And so I learned from a 10th grader my first year playing, and I learned to play without my thumbs. So my second year with the main teacher, I had to relearn how to play with my,
Oh,
but I had progressed so much that the main teacher wanted to teach me. And so it was just, 3 or 4 months of relearning, but that's why I've learned why it's important to teach certain things along the
yeah.
way, just because of that experience of having to go backward. But although I believe it probably solidified my foundation, it was one of those things I'll never forget, having to go back to the beginning.
Oh, I would have been like, what? Yeah. Yeah, I know I think I shared with you, I taught, well, in Suzuki, our youngest, we adopted her from an orphanage. So she was in an orphanage for 2 years. And when she came to live with us, she seemed to really connect with music and she was always humming. And so I enrolled her in, and she could go to a movie and watch a movie and then later say, this is the music that was playing during this scene. And I'd be like, what? Like she would remember that.
Wow.
And so I put her in Suzuki because I thought, well, she's obviously got some kind of ear, and I never learned by ear. So in Suzuki, they learn the twinkles for months. It's so annoying. But the trick, like with the hands, is you learn how to do this, like just different techniques then that you carry throughout your whole your all your life of when you're playing. So anyway, but that's just a side note. But I want to get back to your story because at some point you have a shift in things in your life and you start taking the wrong path. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I went on with my music. I competed with my music. I did all of those things, ended up working representing Steinway and Sons, and then lost everything because of my choices. I was making horrible decisions. I thought I was going back because I'd gone to a performing arts high school, which was residential, those kinds of things. I thought I had missed out because I never went to the bad crowd. I never did those things. And then all of a sudden, life happened and I took horrible choices and roads.
Yeah. So did any of those choices though involve substance use?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
So
started,
go ahead.
if you want me to share what I did, I don't
Oh,
know what.
sure. Yeah. I mean, okay. So my son went from opioids to heroin to meth. They were emaciated, homeless, jobless when they finally him and his wife went to recovery. Most of the moms who listen to this have come to the point in their lives where they no longer are ashamed of their loved ones. They believe like I do, that this is a disease that we need to gather around and care for people through, not treat them like it was, like they were immoral, like it was a moral failure. And so anything, you can share what you want, but just know we're not going to judge you. So
Sure. And I appreciate that. But they say a lot of times people and their spouses marry people like their parents. And my wife that I met, when we first married, there was no substance abuse whatsoever. But her mother warned me that she had gone through a period in her late teens and where there was a lot of partying and those kinds of things, some run-ins with the law even. And when we got together, there was none of that. But then one of her friends died and of a heroin overdose in Erie, Pennsylvania. And that was the opening. And to be honest, I had never connected with anyone like I connected with her. She was the first person, I'm overweight. There's some other things there. And just with self-esteem, that sort of thing, she was the first person that I felt really loved me and accepted me for me. And when she started drifting away, I went after her. I really did. I went after her, and I remember seeing her start down this journey, and I wanted to be with her. And it wasn't a conscious choice that I wanted to go and do drugs or anything like that. I don't think anybody would go down a road if they're like, hey, I'm about to mess everything in my life up.
right. No. Yeah.
But I started walking down that road, and I had never done drugs. And there of course was marijuana,
Yeah.
and then there was cocaine, and she started into heroin. I never made that shift, thankfully, but that led just to so many things coming into our marriage, into our lives. And then there came a point where I was afraid to have our kids around that. So probably like you're saying, the cycle repeated. I took the kids back to my grandparents because I was working full time and I was able to be functional while, doing marijuana and all of that kind of stuff. And she was not.
Yeah.
She ended up losing her medical license. She was a nurse practitioner,
Oh,
ended up losing her medical license, and we lost just about everything. And that's when I started down that road. But I was able to maintain one life, another life, one life, another life for many years,
yeah.
But I never felt authentic after then. I never felt whole. I felt
Right.
guilty. I felt dirty. And, unlike you all, my family wanted nothing to do with me. And even to this day,
Oh,
there's not been a restoration. My family does, even if they
sorry.
watch this, they would not care. They would not care. And they think, that I would probably be on drugs still. And
So,
I can give.
oh, Nick, that just makes my heart ache. It really does. And this is why I do what I do, because so many, I've heard this so many times where the families just abandon their children. And I'm like, okay, so if your kid had heart disease or cancer or diabetes, would you abandon them for that? But the symptoms of an addiction, a substance use disorder, or the disease of the brain, like that the symptoms are so disgusting, like the lying and the cheating. But once you look at the neuroscience of what's happening to the brain, that's where I have my mom start, because you've got to let go of the guilt. What did I do wrong? Of the shame. I don't want to associate myself with them. That's the first step toward healing. So that's going to be a prayer that I will keep praying that your family comes around, because I believe one of these days, like I always, you know how we look at our ancestors from long ago, hundreds of years ago, and we're just like shocked at how they treated certain people. I believe that's going to happen. And 200 years from now, they're going to look back on how we treated people in jails and prisons with substance use disorders, and they're going to be horrified. Like, why did they allow that? Why didn't they stop that? Oh, duh. I don't know. So there's got to be a better way, right? Anyway, I'm on my soapbox. Sorry.
No, hey, we're on the same page. That's exactly how I feel. And of course, that's what propels me to do, what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
But even I don't know, what you want to share from there. I'm not, I, or
Well,
what you.
so here's why I want to go. I want to keep going in your story, because oh my gosh, we haven't gotten to the good part, the great parts. I mean, and who knows? A lot of those are still coming. We don't even know that yet, right? But the next part in your story is you end up in, is it jail or prison?
Prison for almost a decade.
So almost 10 years. Okay.
Absolutely.
And when you get in there, I think when I heard your story, you shared that you were, I don't know if introvert is the right word, but you were withdrawn and you felt hopeless, and you really didn't care about anybody in there. You didn't care about your life. Surely didn't love yourself, I think is what
No,
you said.
absolutely not. I was
But
angry with myself.
sure, right? Yeah. And moms, do you think he's the only one? Like your child who is incarcerated, they don't want pity. They don't, I mean, they just don't want to be where they're at. They look at their lives and they're like, are you kidding me? How did I end up here? Right. Yeah, because you're not a bad person. You're not. So, okay. So you're in this prison and you're feeling, how long did you have feelings of just so much despair and that you loathed yourself? How long did that go on?
About 5 years.
And so
Absolutely.
go ahead.
No, I was just saying that was what I call my darkest period. That was where there was no light, and being around so much violence and that sort of thing, it makes you numb. And typically people go to substances to get numb. And the unfortunate thing about prisons is there are more substances inside of prisons than I believe you could find on the street. And I'm not saying that to discourage anyone, but it's the truth. And it's an unfortunate reality in many prisons. And then when you get to one where it's not there, there's a completely different culture and environment. But it takes the administration as well as the guards to have a zero tolerance policy, both for the prisoners and the staff, to make that happen.
So did you end up at a very different prison after the first 10 years?
After the first 5, yeah,
5 years, I
absolutely.
mean.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. I went from a place where, I saw people raped. I saw all just the worst thing ever. And I was in horrible situations there. And then I went to another prison, and it was a prison that was supposed to help. It was a work camp, but inside the work camp, the staff were so caught up with making money from the inmates and getting their family to send them stuff, and then them bringing substances in and cell phones in and that sort of thing, that there were so much gang influence, as well as and the police officers there, the correctional officers would joke and say that they're the biggest gang. And I remember one time at that particular prison getting my head slammed into a wall because I'd asked the officer not, he was screaming GD, GD, GD. I waited a couple of hours and I said, would you mind not doing that? That's kind of offensive to me. And there was definite physical retaliation after that. But it's amazing because he ended up coming to me like 2 weeks after then and apologizing to me for doing that. And that was kind of my first ray of hope that I had had in a long time, because I had recently started reading the Bible again. And just, I went to a couple of AA meetings. It was kind of like the twilight before the dawn, if that makes sense. That's
Okay.
where kind of hope started springing back up just a little bit, and then it was shut down. I was asked to do some crazy things for staff members, and I ended up, as I shared before with you and with others, being in the box. And although I didn't have a charge, they can put you in the box just for administrative reasons under investigation. And that's what they did to get me transferred from there. And I
Oh, so
ended
they intentionally transferred you to a better place?
all I can think of is the Lord intervened at that point, because they told me I was going to Mayo CI, which in Florida is one of the most dangerous prisons. That's where it said on my transfer sheet. And then the morning of, that changed to Putnam Correctional Institution, which is less than 500 people. It is still a full size, it's considered a full prison. It's not a work camp. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was the place that would change my life.
Wow. Okay, so you go there and you meet they have services. Am I right? Like, and a pastor, and they start a choir. And this is Putnam, is that an all men's facility?
It
So
is.
so then they start a choir, and there's a piano there, and they want to know, does anybody here know how to play the piano? I don't, kind of elaborate on that story, because I don't know if I have it right. But
Yeah, that's very, very close. There had been a revival at that particular prison, and they outgrew their library space. And in the 90s, a chapel was built there. Not all, like my other prisons, didn't have a chapel like that. And so my second day at this prison, I was called to go to that chapel. And that's when I found out my adopted mother, Mama, died. My grandmother passed away. But it was while I was in there that I saw that piano. And it was just like I thought about that piano. I dreamed about that piano, and I wanted to play it, but saying that I wanted to play it made me seem
vulnerable,
vulnerable. And I wasn't willing to do that,
right?
because I had not been at that place long enough. And while incarcerated, you can't show weakness. And that's been the funniest thing since I've been out. Guys that I served time with that are doing well, that I've chosen to surround myself with, and that sort of thing, they're like, wow, you're completely different. And they had known me at the other place. And I said, absolutely. I said, I couldn't be nice and gentle and all those things
No
there,
way.
because I would have been killed probably.
Yeah.
So
Holy smokes. Okay, so then they ask, so does anybody know how to play the piano? So, like, to me, this is like the part of the hero's journey where people are watching just start crying, because you get in there and you start playing the piano, and everybody's like mouth just gapes open, like, oh my gosh, you've been
well,
holding out on us,
it
right?
was well, I wish it was as Hallmark-esque as
Oh,
that. It's very similar. I mean, but what I think is funny is a lot of times in the prison environment, there will be guys, and I ended up becoming an orderly in that chapel, but there are inmates that have their prison job as working in different parts of the prison. When one guy saw me looking at the piano, he was like, you can't touch that. those, those kinds of things. So I was already gun shy, and I
Okay.
was, and he asked me then, he was like, you know how to play? I was like, it just kind of shrugged my shoulder. I didn't admit to knowing how to play, but I didn't want to lie either. So I was like, you know.
Uh,
So when they asked the question, I was already getting in that place emotionally and to make that step because I'd been thinking about this piano now for several months.
well, and
And, and that
didn't you feel a little safer too? I mean, as safe as you
I,
could.
yes, because here's the thing, Michelle, at that particular prison, the volunteers made the difference. There were 2 worship services at that prison every single evening. The chaplain there was called by the Lord. In the morning, there would be Bible study from 9 o'clock until noon to anyone that was able to come. In the afternoon, they would show one of the Christian movies and that sort of thing. That's in the sanctuary of that chapel. Then there was a library, and there was also a study room where you could rent little DVD, or not rent, but just check out
Goodness.
DVDs and other resources.
Wow.
It felt like a real place. And
Oh
it
my
was a
goodness.
way to really just dive in. There's an accredited ministry licensing school, Higher Ground School of Ministry. There's
Wow.
Evangelism Explosion, Toastmasters International, and not the Gavel Club, but the real Toastmasters, and an amazing Kairos ministry. It
Wow.
was so, it was just an amazing part of the journey that the Lord had me go there, because I just started going to the chapel. And that's what it was. I just started getting into that daily spiritual formation, and I started praying again eventually. And it was
Sure.
during that prayer time that I would, just think of, thank you, Lord, that I can be where there's music and all of these things. And I had figured out that you had to join the choir to play an instrument. So I was already wanting to do that. I'd already done my time, if you will, in the choir, because there's a waiting period before you could play an instrument. But when I was about to say, I play the piano, the chapel where he's like, yeah, the big boy plays. And that's so so he volunteered me, and so he remembered from that very first conversation that,
Oh.
and so
You
that's,
know what? He knew from the look in your eye. He
yeah,
saw the way you were pining for that machine, not machine, but that instrument, right? Yeah, he
right.
could see, he could tell. Okay, so tell us about that. Because obviously you're a good player, you're a good, great musician. Okay, but I'm sure you had to be rusty. So the first time you sit down to play, were you reading some hymnal, or were you given like sheet music for a song the choir was singing? What do you remember what that was?
I do remember it was for Christmas. It was the song Mary Did You Know?
Oh,
And
love it.
absolutely. And the cool thing is, I haven't had a chance to expound on this with our other interaction, but I've been looking at this old piano that, once again, I wouldn't have paid $5 for prior to incarceration. Before incarceration, I had a 6'2" handmade concert grand piano from the Czech Republic. I think it was like $42,000 whenever we bought it, and that was a used price.
Oh,
So
my
I
golly gosh.
had a beautiful concert grand before this, and so I'm looking at this piano like, oh my. So I think that I'm about to play this old upright piano I've looked at the entire time, and they bring out a full size Yamaha digital piano that's in the back. So it's even better because I'm not dealing with an out of tune old
Right. Yeah.
piano. Now, eventually, get this, my 6th grade teacher paid to have that piano tuned because I told her about it. And she ended up, and
Going back? Wait,
she yeah, she is one of the only people that maintain contact with me during my
Oh,
incarceration, Mrs. Romine. And she became like a mom to me, and she was my hope cheerleader along the way. And
oh,
she,
so beautiful.
so,
Oh, is she
so
still alive?
she is, and she lives in Alabama. I've seen her since I've been out, and she and her husband came to see me 3 different times while I was incarcerated.
Oh, I love her. I love her so much. I don't even know her. Oh
Oh,
gosh.
she's wonderful, but she sent me some of her sheet music because mine had been displaced, and she also played classically and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And so I got my hand in, and some of the compose. I believe I got a little bit of Chopin and
yeah.
Beethoven, and it was wonderful, but also a lot of hymn arrangements. So we eventually got the acoustic piano because that's always my preference. And but it was cool because then people started wanting to learn. But
In
you
prison.
asked, right? You asked me though if I was rusty and that sort of
Yeah,
thing. It came back to me like that. And
yeah.
I don't know how else to say that. I'm not being conceited when I say
Oh
that at all.
no, yeah. It's like a muscle. It's like riding a bike. Once you start,
Right.
yeah.
It was in here, and I wasn't playing the really complicated
No,
Chopin etudes and that sort of thing. So it's not like it took
didn't
my
matter.
dexterity a moment to catch up. So
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Cause I think I shared, I went out and
yes.
got this little keyboard and I sat down and I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh, I guess I can play a little. Yeah. Um, so okay, so then how long after that? Well, okay, no, I don't want to miss this part. So other people are in prison with you and they're now learning learning music theory from you. Um,
Mhm.
and how did that like come about? How did that transpire as far as like, how do you go from just being a piano player with a choir to actually teaching them theory?
Right. Well, the choir, I want to say that when I got there, the choir had 6 people, and then the step up group, the praise team, had 6 people. But to be in the praise team, you also had to be in the choir, so it's the same 6 people. So, and that
Oh,
I can that I'm just going with their rules and everything. But once I started playing and that sort of thing, and I had played guitar in the past and some other instruments. I started helping them gently, not like, hey, you should do it this way, because that's
right.
never the approach to take there. But it took a while to get the other musicians even to trust me. It's all about trust
Sure.
and them knowing your intentions. I'm not trying to take this from you. You need to
No.
know that I do not want to play the guitar. Those types
Right.
of
You
just
want to empower them. Yeah.
yes, and
Encourage them.
that's
Yeah.
right, but that takes trust, and that
Yes.
is not easily given,
No, in
especially
prison.
in that environment. Absolutely not. So it took, I would say, about 9 months of me just practicing quite a bit, of me just being there, and I wouldn't offer my suggestions on choral technique. I just sat there and I was happy to play. And that was it.
Yeah.
And then the person that was over the music, the inmate that was over the music, left. He got out of prison and
Oh,
that sort of thing. And he appointed me to carry the torch. And that's how it always happened in there. And he said, I think Nic is going to be the person, to carry you forward. And so just learn from him. And
wow.
so I took that as it was the most meaningful thing I could have had at that moment.
Sure.
And so we went with it. And there was a volunteer who happened to be from the same part of rural Alabama where I grew up. And we had that small talk at a Kairos 4-day weekend, kind of like the Emmaus walk and those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So I had the amazing opportunity to go through that weekend. I connected with Mr. Jim, who had already appreciated my music, and he kept saying that. But at that point, people were asking me to teach them. And right next to the chaplain's office was a very small room. And he allowed me to teach people music inside of that room. And
Okay.
there was a door into his office so that he could maintain supervision, and which is necessary.
Sure.
And but it was wonderful. But I never had time then to play anything that I wanted to play because I was always teaching everyone else.
Oh,
So I was trying to really get some of my practice time back. Michelle, I was being selfish in offering the music theory class because I wanted more time. I didn't know that so many people from the prison would actually want to play. And we had to have waiting list after waiting list because so many people wanted to learn how to read music. And that's exactly what happened. Mr. Jim donated the supplies. I wanted a book. And by then we had the JPay tablets and that sort of thing. So Mrs. Romine gave me some money through JPay to download several classical albums. And I went through Baroque music, classical music, romantic music, contemporary music, as well as a lot of choral masterworks, those kinds of things. So that when the music theory class would start, I had what I called exposure. And that's where they're exposed to music I know they've probably never heard unless it's on a movie soundtrack or
yeah.
something like that. And as I started teaching them not only theory, but music vocabulary is what I called it.
Yeah.
Just those key terms as they would listen, I would have them write down what tempo are we at allegro, or we presto, is it really fast? What are our dynamic markings?
Right.
And I refuse to allow people to say loud and soft,
Yeah.
but to use
Oh,
forte and
yeah.
piano
Just say all the,
and right, kind of like a German class where
you
you
are
have
tough.
so I was, but they wanted that.
Yeah.
They are, because many volunteers that come in, they're scared. You know what I mean? They don't know how far to push the people. And at that point, I was beyond that because they
You were one
recognized
of them. It didn't matter. You didn't have anything to lose. You were already, yeah. Yeah.
right, exactly.
You knew
And
how
they
to relate.
right. And because I did, I could say stuff that a volunteer couldn't say.
Right.
I could make analogies.
Yep.
And we talk about drugs and that sort of thing. I realized that in teaching the music notes and everything, that I wasn't getting through with the whole note, the half note, the quarter, and someone piped up, it's like drugs. And
Yeah. Here's the
and
whole
that's
deal.
exactly, yep. And that's how they related to some of those things. Now, I tried to stay away from that, but inevitably, every single class that would come up. And I found out with the GED instructors that they would also use that for fraction work.
Sure.
So
Oh
you
my
use
goodness.
what people know. But all of that to say, so we had a time of exposure, we had a time of oral skill set training, like you were talking about. The Suzuki method definitely uses oral skills, and I taught them solfege. They had to use the hand signs for do re mi. They had, and we were doing, I would get them in a circle and have different people lead each week and find their voice. We worked on vocal breathing, all of those things. And they would sing row, row, row your boat round after round until they could hear the harmony and keep a
Keep there.
consistent rhythm. And
Oh,
then we would do, there's an interdenominational monastery, and it's in Taizé, France. If you ever Google me, you'll see I love that place. I've been there several times.
okay.
There's some news articles about that. But what drew me to Taizé was the intricate harmony and the textures vocally of that style of music. And all it is, they're typically 8 measure songs in
Okay.
4-part harmony, sometimes 6-part harmony. And that's what we did. That we would break up into sections. And there were a couple of guys that had been in piano with me, and it was what I called their application. They would go into the practice room and they would just hammer out the parts. And then finally the guys started being able to read the parts, and that's where those light bulbs came on. That's where those aha moments happened,
Yes.
where they saw that the solfege, with why I had them going up all the way with the solfege, because the music goes up and down.
Right.
The
Like
dynamics.
everything started making sense. It was a different
Yeah,
language to them and they were learning it. They were
exactly.
embracing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Wow.
they started composing and playing. And Michelle, over 400 men completed at least the first 2 levels. That's what I considered having completed the class. So that meant that they did 32 weeks of intense music theory training just to get to the point of being able to pick up an instrument. They weren't able to apply it until that we had so many people,
Oh my
we could not,
goodness.
we couldn't even have them touch an
That's
instrument.
unbelievable.
So, but it was awesome.
So, so how long then after that were you incarcerated? Like how long did you work with them before you were released?
I worked there about 3.5 years that took place, and I'm see the fruit of the guys that got out with the first couple of classes, where they would take those classes and then be released, is amazing. It is
So
simply
that
amazing.
that's like another story, isn't it?
It is. We won't have to get in there. I mean,
Well,
but
because I'm
they're
thinking,
still
oh
producing
man, we
music.
need to hear it all, right? So you wouldn't believe the things that are going through my head right now. Cause I'm like, dude, I want to write
I
your
want to have a
screenplay.
reunion. That's what I want, to get them together and
Yes.
for us to do. Like, I've got a lot of hopes and dreams for the new year, and getting together all of the guys that I know that took the first 2 levels at least, and to get us together and to do some of
So
those choral arrangements we made and things like that.
so I would like to have you come back and I want to talk about those men in the next segment, maybe,
Okay,
I guess. But
perfect.
to close just for today, um, so what Nic is doing now is he has an effective group. This is from your website, stormfoundation.us. We are an effective group of people dedicated to making strategic impact in reducing opioid deaths and recidivism. I can never say this word, recidivism. Did I say it right?
That's it.
And so he and I, share the same passion, only his story is just fantastic. But Storm Foundation came from a man he met in prison, and his name was Storm. Do you think you could talk about Storm quickly here and then maybe elaborate in the next session? Or
Sure.
okay.
I met Storm. He was one of the folks that went through the music theory class. My first time encountering him outside of the chapel, I was trying to lose some weight, and I was walking the track that they had there. And he said, "Can I share my testimony with you?" And he did that, and he did it graciously, and he just loved Jesus. And
Yeah.
he had a hard road. He had been addicted to drugs. His mom was addicted to drugs. She ended up passing away of AIDS, and he was just in a lot of pain, made choices all related to substance abuse.
Yeah.
And he passed away, Michelle, 3 months before his release after doing almost 15 years. He was in a work release, and he had an issue with a blockage in his stomach. And he had said his stomach was hurting for a couple of days. And then he was found on the toilet, and he was just completely, he had passed away.
Oh,
And I found that out while I was at Putnam still. And he and I had signed up to go to work release as well at that point because I changed. I was on good behavior. I wanted to go to the same one he was at. And I had to change because that was, and
Oh,
I did.
gosh. So,
It's after him. He was one of my best friends, and he was in the praise team, and
so
he's
he
awesome.
went, so he was going to get out. So he went to work release. And so was that like the next progression to your release would have been work release and then out? Or did you just
Right.
go from there to out? Or did you ever
No,
go to,
I went to work release
you
as
did?
well at Bridges of America. I did 14 months. After Putnam, I got out and I was able to get a job. And that's how I started saving and doing the things that I needed to do because I didn't have family anymore. And I
Yeah.
knew that I didn't have a mama to call and I had to make it on my own. So I went there. I started working as much as I could. And when I got out of work release, Michelle, I had almost $14,000 saved up, and that's what I was able to start my life with. And it's just God intervening and making doors open.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, moms, I just want you to know that, this is a hope story, and we can't do it for our children, right? We can't do it for them. We can't do all the work for them. We can't make the choices for them because they're adults, but we can encourage and we can love and we can meet them where they are and just listen to understand. And I'd love for you to go to stormfoundation.us if this touched your heart at all, because I know that Nic, in his ministries of what he's doing now, he is director of development. Say it,
That's
housing.
it.
And restorative housing with a company called Inspirational Ministries. But this isn't what Storm Foundation is it? No.
No, we are partnering with them, but
Okay.
no.
So
I went up, I started Storm Foundation and I started looking at places that were effective, Michelle, because there's no time to waste. And I want to see people that are being effective so that Storm and I had great ideas in prison when it was just going to be the redemption ministries. But, as we're doing this, I want to be effective. And they have a statistic where instead of 78% incarceration, they're at 14% incarceration. And that's such a drastic statistic that I had to know more.
right.
And the amazing thing is their founder and Storm were best friends in another facility. And that's why we have the connection we do. And if you look on their website, you'll find more about Storm as well. But when
So
I wanted,
what's their for website?
it's inspiration-ministries.org.
Okay. And then ministries.org. I'm writing this down, moms, and then I can put it in the show notes too, and I'll look it up. And so if they donate money to the Storm Foundation, how is that different?
I guess it's different just because you'll love this, because of my charges being related to fraud that actually got me into prison. I want to be above reproach with anything that I'm involved with. And so I've actually asked Inspiration Ministries to help administer the finances for Storm, and the board of directors with Storm agreed with that. I just wanted accountability and transparency where if someone looks me up, they're like, okay, what's that guy got going on? It's
Yeah,
where I can always say, here you go, here's our financial report, and
right.
I'm not tempted. There's nothing there, and I absolutely
And,
love that.
and so the money goes to helping people in recovery, or
Yes, I actually start after our podcast today at 3:15. Actually, I am going to begin the process for being licensed as a peer support specialist for those that are dealing with substance abuse, because I want our homes here in Florida, just like Inspiration's homes there,
In
to
Indiana. Yeah.
yes, in Indiana, to be certified recovery homes, so
Right.
that when these folks are getting out of prison, or when they've reached their last hit in substance abuse, they can come to our homes. They can go through between 6 weeks and 12 weeks of time where they focus on themselves, not to be a halfway house, but to be an all the way house.
Oh, I
And
love it.
then, yeah, and
I
then
love it.
go and work and those types of things with businesses we're networking with already. And we are in the process right now of buying 3 recovery homes here in Northeast Florida. And you'll find out in Indiana, Northeast Indiana, Inspiration has over 200 recovery beds that are
Wow.
there and
Hey,
available. So that's what, if
awesome.
people were to donate, it would just go to housing, because people have donated beds and clothes and all
Yeah,
of these things,
we
and
did that too. Yeah.
that's awesome. We just need
Yeah.
homes now. So
Yeah, we just, yeah, we downsized. So we donated it to a shelter, for a place for moms who transition from jails and prisons. Well, thank you so much, Nic. And I will definitely have you back, because I want to hear more of your story. And I know others want to hear more about it too. So just hold on, but stay with me. And thank you for listening, moms. If you have any questions, I'm going to put them in the show notes here on YouTube, if you're listening on YouTube, or on my podcast, Moms Letting Go Without Giving Up. God bless.